Good morning and welcome to the Kim B. Davis Show. I'm your host, Kim B. Davis, and this morning we have Edwina King. She is a policy analyst with Detroit City Council member James Tate. She is also a Howard alum. She is also a U of D Mercy uh, alum from law school. And because she is such a bad sister, she also has a dual degree from the University of Windsor, and she is also a Delta. So, there's so many things that I could say about you, Miss Edwina King, but you are such a fabulous woman. And, I thank you for being on the show. And today we are talking about travel and wanderlust. And yes, I'm a little bit jelly when I sit on Facebook and I see you in, Istanbul or Ethiopia or wherever you are. You're going to tell us some of the different places that we've been. But in talking about travel, I want to start us off with what happened a couple of days ago in Wisconsin. We saw a young man shot in the back 7 times in front of his children. Share your thoughts. And again, good morning.
Good morning, Kim. Thank you for the lovely introduction, and good morning to your listeners and viewers as well. Um, watching, so unfortunately, I did see the video regarding Jacob Blake on Facebook, which that's something we need to talk about as a community regarding. What is appropriate to share. And it's one thing to share information for that information purposes versus sharing for likes, if you will. And it's not to question the intent of anyone who has shared the video, but also noting that sometimes sharing things like that can be triggering for a lot of people for a lot of different reasons. So I did watch the video, and it was very, very hard to watch. And I understand, although I'm not familiar with criminal law in Wisconsin, um, what I am familiar with is the fact that here you had a man, and from what I understand the facts to be, was breaking up a fight. There's a domestic situation at his home, or at a place where he was, and from that point, police were called to break up the domestic situation. And he all of a sudden got in his, or attempted to get in his car, and you had some Yosemite Sam police officer who just all of a sudden apologies, decided that it was necessary at to shoot him not once but 7 times in the back. And so, although, and I have a great deal of respect for police. Some of my closest friends are some of DPD's finest. And in talking to them a lot of times, in talking about especially police brutality, there's a very, very fine line between wanting to go home, because officers have families too, they're human first, but also making sure that you uphold the law and that you do what is necessary to diffuse a situation. And I think, especially in this climate, racially speaking, that some officers are starting to blur the line between the former and the latter. What's necessary to disarm a situation, and then what amounts to police brutality. Um, what I do hope is that the family of Jacob Blake, I understand he's fighting for his life. So first, I'm praying for healing um, in his situation for his body. But even beyond that, praying for justice for him and for his family, praying for healing, mentally speaking, for his family as well, especially his young kids, because that's something that's very, very traumatic. And I, in my professional capacity, I have sat on um, community or councils, if you will, for policing. And one of the things about, and I'll wrap it up, but one of the things about people of color, and I always state that, I said, is our relationship with police is completely different than non POC in the sense that, you know, it's pretty sad that when, and granted, I would give the city of Detroit credit, they are, making strides towards changing that narrative. But when you as a kid, especially a young black child, have experienced or know someone by like third grade who's had a negative interaction with police,
Mhm.
it changes how you view police. And so you don't see them in the light of, oh, they're here to protect and serve. You see them in an adversarial way. And so, because of that, that might all of a sudden create triggers where, even if, and I'm a law abiding citizen, but I would be lying if I don't feel a sense of apprehension when I'm pulled over or if I'm stopped by police for whatever reason. And I feel like at that point, dang, I need to make sure that I get out of this situation so that way I'm not a hashtag. I don't want to be someone's hashtag. I don't want to be on someone's mural. I don't want to be on someone's t shirt. And it seems like, that's something that we have to address, even for some people who come from our New Americans committee or communities. For them, where they're from, policing might be something completely different. And that's one of the interesting things about travel is you learn how, of course, you know how life is in the U.S., but you get to see, depending on how immersed you are in someone else's country and culture, you see how you see things from well, at least I do, a political standpoint, a social standpoint, cultural standpoint, and even just in talking and seeing different things. Like in some countries, the police are worse than the military, and so you've had police who stage coups. And so when some of those individuals come to the U.S., I don't want to say it's a deprogramming, but you have to understand that, hey, for some people, you don't want to interact with the police because you might not come home, um, and what that looks like. And so, for all of those who are traveling to Wisconsin to protest, because that is, I mean, yeah, travel can be fun, but there's a lot of reasons why people travel. And certainly protesting and social justice causes is a very great reason to do so. Everything doesn't have to be a turn up. Definitely be safe, fight the power, and because Black Lives Matter.
Absolutely.
And one of the interesting things about that too, from a travel perspective, is now you're starting to see it globally, where people are protesting acts against Americans, in particular Black Americans, in relation to police brutality. So,
Thank you so much, Edwina. That's why I asked you that question because I knew that from all the different things that you do in the community and on Detroit City Council and in your sorority work and your HBCU network and being a trained attorney, that you understand those things. And I'm glad that you put in that connection to travel because we are talking about travel today. And one of the questions that I'm going to ask you later are people that have an apprehension towards travel because of that, because they don't want to go someplace where somebody looks different from them because they've heard, oh, the police are bad, or this is an issue. But before we get to that, I want to ask you because wanderlust, which is that intense need to travel, is a wonderful thing. And you have traveled a lot of places, and I mean a lot of places. So, first off, tell me, why do you travel? And what does it benefit you? What does it give you?
Okay. Those are great questions. So the reason why I travel is twofold. One, so travel has been ingrained in me ever since I was a baby. Like my parents, my father, God rest his soul, Larry King, as well as my mom, um, they always made it a point to take my younger brother and I places with them. My father, who got this quote from his father, God rest his soul, used to always tell us, he said, "You don't know what's around the block until you go there." And so, because of that, they always made it a point for us to be not only conscious and activists as children, but also to be great global citizens. And so, one of the reasons why I do travel is I like, of course, I love, fun and adventurous activities, but I also look at things, especially in my current work capacity. I look at things and I'm like, oh, that's dope. Why don't we have this in Detroit? Or this is something I can bring back to my city where and we can start to implement this. So I look at things like transit. I know it's so geeky, but I look at things like transit, green space, infrastructure, quality of life, and different things like that. Even though it's my personal travel, but if I'm in a city, I can't help but do this.
Mhm.
In addition, I do it because I love people and I love culture. And I feel like it helps broaden your perspective on a lot of different things. It helps me to be a more um, open minded person, interacting with people uh, who are different from me, ethnically, culturally, racially speaking, different things like that. In addition, it's a great form of self care for me because travel makes me do two things consistently. It makes me glad that I have the ability to move freely um, as I go throughout the world globally. But then it also makes me appreciate Detroit even more. Because when I'm ready to come home, I'm like, look, I'm ready to get back in the D. Like, I don't care where I go, Detroit is home for me. Even if I'm hardly home, I'm always repping Detroit. So,
I get that. And you know what? It's not a geeky thing to talk about transit. Transit is an interesting thing because you can go different places and you'll see things and you go, well, why is it that they have mass transit? And
hmm
it seems like it works very well. And I'll give you an example. So when I was in Honolulu, they have mass transit. They've
yeah,
got great bus system and transit system, and they all interconnect. And I thought, oh, you just go here, you do this, you do that. The same thing in Toronto. And I'm like, what's the issue in Detroit? And I know it's politics, and that's a whole nother
right,
conversation. But
right.
it's one of those things where you go places and you appreciate what you don't have, but you also appreciate the way that other people do it. So that's an important thing. So now here's another important question. What is your favorite place to go in the world? And is this a place that you go often or is that a separate place?
Woo. So I I would definitely say that my favorite. Okay, I'm gonna break this down stateside versus
Okay,
um,
go ahead.
internationally. So my favorite place stateside is by far New Orleans.
Okay.
I mean, but and then granted, DC is a close second, but
I knew that
New
was
Orleans, right?
coming.
DC is my second home. But New Orleans by far is my favorite place because New Orleans is so different than the rest of the country.
Okay.
Just one by virtue of it, and it's French, Spanish, African or Creole and
Hmm.
Cajun culture, but it's a great time. The food is amazing. I love seafood, so to me, it's just like the seafood mecca. Um, the fact that I feel like New Orleans really take to heart the whole mantra of laissez le bon temps rouler, letting the good times roll. And it's just every time I go, it's a party. I've gone for a wedding. I've gone for, Essence Festival. I've gone for conferences. I've gone for so many different reasons, and every single time I have had the time of my life to the point where I'm at the airport tired and just like, you know. So New Orleans by far is my favorite place to visit outside of Detroit, stateside. My favorite place internationally is twofold. One is Paris. Paris, I have a very, very beautiful relationship with Paris, even as a kid. I told my dad, I said, that's it. I saw American in Paris and Sabrina, and I said, that's it. I'm up out of here. When I'm 18, I'm moving to Paris. And, he tried to talk me out. And I was like, well, you can always come visit. So I didn't move, but I did get a chance to go before I was 18. And I fell in love, started crying, toured. I went with my high school. We went to Paris, northern France, like Normandy, Brittany, and then went to, I would say it's well, it was south of Paris and west, so like Samour, to visit different castles and stuff with the French club. Um, but every time I go, I've gone, for romantic trips. I've gone for visiting with my family, and it's cool because one, Paris has a lot of museums, and I love museums, and of course, seeing the touristy stuff like Eiffel Tower, Sacre Coeur, Palace of Versailles, the Arc de Triomphe, and getting to experience that, even though I've done it before, but getting to experience that with new people on their first trip to Paris, I love it. Um, and so that's that. My favorite, my other favorite place is Accra, Ghana, and I could see myself moving there once I retire, many moons from now. And so I had the blessing of going, one, for my birthday, and two, it was during a time where, and I didn't know it when I planned it, but went to, of course, Accra, and this was before the year of return, so I felt like I got to experience true Ghana. Um, and seeing everything was full circle for me. So, of course, I was the first person since we left the continent to come back to West Africa, in particular Ghana, especially that connection with Black Americans. So, of course, got to experience the slave castles, which was very, very heavy, and I recommend all um, Africans of the diaspora to take that trip because and to visit those castles, Elmira and Cape Coast. But then the other part of it, which was so amazing, was so in Kumasi, which is the home of the Ashanti Kingdom. It's a little bit north of Accra. I got the chance to visit and participate in what's called, I believe, it's Aquaside. And if I butchered the name, I apologize. But basically, the king of the Ashanti tribe opens up the castle, and it's this huge celebration. Folks from all different tribes come to the castle. It was completely opulent. I saw gold everywhere, beautiful melanated folk singing, dancing. They were in their finest kente cloth or, other tribal cloth. Some people had on mud cloth. And it was just this huge party that I felt like I was invited to. And I literally danced in the middle of a castle. It was so much fun. People singing, dancing, shooting guns in the air. Like, it was just this huge celebration. And the best way to describe it was coming to America. That was it. That opening scene, that was it. I was like, oh, this is lit. And so it was just the most amazing trip. And I had everybody was so friendly. Learned a little bit of Twi while I was there. It was the best trip ever. And so I said I could definitely see myself going back to the continent, especially because a lot of people have huge misconceptions of what it means to travel in Africa. So, yeah.
Okay, so that's fantastic. So Accra is a place that I want to go to as well. I want to
Oh,
go and visit the slave castles because everyone that I know who's visited has had an experience. And I don't mean that they were touched by anything, but just the fact that they were moved by the place that your ancestors were in.
yeah.
I neglected to tell everybody that you are a fluent French speaker, so that
Ah!
helps. So when you said your New Orleans statement, I was like, I forgot about that because
Oh,
but but here's the thing, and we have this conversation often. When Americans travel abroad, is it culturally necessary that we should try and speak their language? Because you said in Ghana you learned a little bit of Twi, so that's their native tongue,
yes.
correct? Okay.
Yeah, one of many, but
And I figure one of many. But typically, sometimes we hear the bad American. Everybody just wants to speak English, and if you're in France or if you're in Germany or if you're in some place in Africa or in the Middle East, you should at least attempt to speak that. And do you think it makes it a little bit easier for you because you actually are fluent in a foreign language?
so it's funny because yes and no. So it's funny because so I speak French, but French speakers also know they can tell I'm American because I have a very thick American accent, which I didn't realize was an accent, but it is what it is. But they also, in my interactions with going to francophone countries, they also appreciated the fact that I tried to communicate with them in their language. Um, what now? I will say this: unless you have the time to learn a language, um, you, of course, in certain industries, especially tourism-based industries, people will know English because, realistically speaking, for it's not just American tourists, but you might have Italian tourists, Chinese tourists. You might have, middle folks from Saudi Arabia, wherever. They might not necessarily know, Chinese, Arab or any other language, but the common language for you might be English. So, with that being said, some people just speak English because it's just easier to communicate with folks in that regard. With that being said, you cannot assume that people, there's an old saying that's true, when in Rome, you do what the Romans do. You cannot assume that everyone speaks English because we're English speakers. Some people have, are very fluent because one of the things I've noticed in a lot of different countries is that people learn English early. In the US, you might learn a little Spanish, you might learn a little French. It really depends on where you're from, but it's not an integral part of our education system. I put it that way. So because of that, you'll have so for those folks who know English, they'll love to talk to you because they're figuring out, oh, I can practice my English on you. And for some people, I don't know what the but hey, it's not for me to judge. They're like, oh, if you say, oh, your English is good, oh, thank you, thank you, thank you. Like it's because for some people, knowing English is tied to economic improvement. Um, but in the same token, I always try to learn a few phrases wherever I'm going if I'm not completely fluent. So, by virtue of being a French speaker, you can kind of pick up on other Latin languages easy. So, Spanish and Italian, of course, but sometimes you can pick up a little bit of Portuguese. Portuguese is actually more difficult than people think.
Mhm.
But if you don't do that, at the very least, I think people should learn how to say hello, please, thank you, and where's the bathroom
That's right.
in someone's language. Because realistically speaking, it shows a respect for their culture, and that you're at least open and willing to exchange and receive as well as give. Now, some Americans are terrible travelers. It just, it is. When you, and going back to the whole notion of, when you're in Rome, you do what the Romans do. Um, Back, I want to say maybe about 4 or 5 years ago, Dubai was the move.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody, Emirates had a Christmas glitch where they were giving out tickets for $187 round trip. A lot of folks took advantage of it, and they went to the Middle East, Dubai, which is in the UAE, and tried to have a Vegas style turn up. And while Dubai is more, I don't want to say liberal, but more relaxed than other countries in that, and even Abu Dhabi, which is in the same country, in that region, you can't do everything in the US that you can do there. And part of doing what the Romans do is understanding and respecting what their laws are. So even something as simple as, walking around with shorts on, it might be okay to be on the Vegas Strip or, Sunset Drive walking around with, I call them booty coolers.
Yeah.
Over there, you look out of place. When people travel during Ramadan, which is a huge um, holiday for those who are Muslim,
Mm-hmm.
you have to, yeah, you might be hungry, but some restaurants are closed because they're fasting. It's their culture, and their religion. And in some cases, it's even a part of the law. Like restaurants can't open there. Drinking alcohol might not be permitted in certain places. I remember I have a really good friend of mine who lives in Abu Dhabi, and I laugh at him all the time because he's Jamaican by birth. His favorite food is jerk pork.
You
Clearly,
can't work.
it's haram. Like you don't eat pork over there. So he said there's like one or maybe a handful of grocery stores, and it's all the way in the back, and it's just like like you're not even allowed to purchase it. Even something as simple as, but he respects their culture. Something as simple as cohabitating or traveling with people of the opposite sex in certain parts of the world is not permitted. Now, you can boo up and shack up and have a vacation here, but if you go over there, you have to respect their rules. Just like you would want someone to respect the rules of, our country and our state when they come and visit the U.S. Again, sometimes bad Americans, and some people have capitalized off of it. If you go to the Vatican, and it clearly tells you you need to dress appropriately. And I'm going to put this pin in it in the sense that there's really no, with Google travel groups and just a simple search, there's really no excuse why people are ignorant to what's going on. I always make it a point to look at what the State Department says, read some articles, and then look at what the cultural norms and customs are of a particular country or region. And so with the Vatican, and I'll wrap that part up, you can't wear sleeves or your like this shirt might not be considered appropriate. I would have to cover my arms.
Mm-hmm.
And so it never fails. You'll see people there with booty coolers on, tank tops, both men and women. And they're
Uh-huh.
like, look, it's like Studio 54 getting up into the Vatican. If you're not dressed the part, you're not getting in. It's the holiest place for the Roman Catholic Church. And so, and they'll say, no, you can't get in. And then you'll see some vendors. So then you got to make a split second decision like, yo, do I really want to go inside St. Peter's Basilica, or am I just going to sit this out and just be in the in the square? And so for those that do go in, there's a vendor over there selling scarves at 20 euros a pop. So whereas you could have changed shirts for free at your house, now all of a sudden you're paying. In some cases, I saw one lady had to get don't be um, 40. She paid 40 euros for two scarves because she had to get one for each leg because you didn't dress appropriately.
Wow.
So um, and then yeah, so I'll just leave it at that. So, sometimes we do act out as Americans, and, um, we have to change that narrative. So I'll leave it at that because I have stories. Oh, Lord, I stories
and,
something.
and that's why I reached out to you, Edwina, because I knew that you had stories. And I'm so grateful that you brought up Dubai. Dubai is a place that I want to go. It's on my bucket list. But I
Hmm.
remember seeing the fabulous pictures that you took in Dubai, and you were wearing a hijab.
Yeah,
Is
yes, yes.
now, and so, and I understand it because one of the things that I've read about Dubai, they have said you can't even hold hands if you're walking in the street. That's not considered appropriate. And
Hmm.
so, again, it is researching and understanding. But what, outside of the things that you've mentioned, is there anything that you've missed that specifically for Black women who are traveling? Because we are one of the biggest travel groups. You have all these groups now that have women traveling together, and what things should we be looking for? And I see there's a bee bothering
Yeah,
you.
right. Like, come on, B. Like, you ain't in the interview.
But what things should we be looking out for or be aware of?
So it first, it's very interesting traveling as black, um, a black person, and then a black woman traveling abroad. Um, Now, of course, stateside, there are certain things that common sense prevails. If it doesn't look right, doesn't feel right, you probably should make a different decision at that moment. But traveling abroad, and I'm only going to speak to my experiences
Please.
because it's my truth.
Mhm.
It is very, very interesting and eye opening because I have traveled with groups and I have traveled solo abroad. And so, one of the things that I always make it a point to first and foremost um, be aware of is that for Black people, the closest you will get to, let's call it what it is, white privilege, is having a blue passport, which
Yes.
is either US or a maroon passport. So, US, Canadian, um, European, or Great Britain, because their passport's a little different than everyone else's
Mhm.
in Europe, and seeing how you're treated. Um, the unfortunate thing is, for some countries, Black people are not, well, we're not treated right here,
Right.
but definitely you're not treated you're treated differently um, in other countries. And sometimes people don't want to talk about it, but hey, it is what it is. And then when they see that you're American, it's all of a sudden the conversation is different. They don't see black or white, they see green.
Yes.
So that is an interesting thing. The other part of it too is when people look at me, they don't see American. The question automatically turns into, where are you from? What
Mhm.
are you? And so I'm like, I'm a black American. And they're like, oh, no, but where are you really from? And I'm like, no, I'm the descendant of slaves. Like, my folks been here since 1803
Mhm.
that I can document. So ain't no telling who else, and that's just the black folk. So ain't no telling who else, been here before that or whatever. And so, with that being said, so there's conversations that you have to have about, race and what it means to be Black American. With
Mhm.
that being said, you have to understand, and I certainly encourage, Black Americans, especially Black women, to travel, especially traveling abroad and by yourself. You know you're going to have fun by yourself because you're doing exactly what you want to do. With that being said, I think you need to be mindful of one, safety, and again, understanding that, you know, especially if you don't know the language, um, using mass transit, but constantly being aware of your surroundings, um, you know, not taking for granted, certain different scenarios. Even when I go out, like if, say, for instance, I'm going out to a restaurant, I make it a point to be visible If I'm staying in a hotel, I let the concierge know, hey, I'm leaving out. If you don't see me by night, yeah, call the police. Something did not go right. Something went terribly wrong. But being friendly with the hotel staff helps. For me, it makes me feel safe
Mhm.
because then is first and foremost, I'm more likely than not the only black person or a handful of black folks they're seeing. So they kind of memorize you um, just off of that. Like my brother and I, we were out of town recently, and they called him Cisco because he had at that time blonde hair. So, but they knew him. So if he didn't show up, they can say, "Oh, okay, he's missing," so on and so forth. Being safe, being aware. Certain things that I might wear here, I would not necessarily take abroad with me. So I love my purse. I'm a purse gal, and I'm a jewelry gal, but maybe not looking so quote unquote American, being flashy and different things, which would draw unnecessary attention to yourself. You got to kind of tone it down.
Mhm.
Um, some people use, I don't judge them, I don't do it, but some people use dating apps while they're abroad. You know, do you have fun?
Right,
Hopefully you get a match. You get a second passport out of it. But also, again, being aware of your surroundings as if you would, if you were stateside or, our case, Detroit. Um, Another part of it too is, and again, I'm only speaking my truth because it's happened.
mhm.
Um, Being aware of your surroundings in the sense of also, so unfortunately in certain countries, sex trade is, big. It is what it is.
Mhm.
And I unfortunately have had the negative experience. And this far out, it doesn't outweigh any positive experience that I've had. But I've had situations where I was accosted as if I was a sex worker.
Oh.
And, I don't judge anybody how they make their money, but that ain't what I do. Like,
Mhm.
it's just not what I do. And so, in those situations, again, having to be aware, like, no, that's not what I am. And then I need to get out of Dodge because you didn't know how it was going to
Mhm.
end. But for the most part, outside of the safety concerns and, for some people, if you're living abroad, understanding that, hey, when it comes to the hair thing, I might not be able to find, some shea butter, in, in China. Like, it's just, outside of that, just constantly being aware of your surroundings. And again, if it doesn't look right or feel right, then 9 times out of 10, you need to make a different decision. But also knowing that those are the very rare exceptions and not the rule. Like, there's nothing wrong with, traveling by yourself as a black woman. Again, strongly encouraged.
Mhm.
You
Mhm.
do it once, I promise you, you'll keep doing it again if you have a good experience.
Absolutely, absolutely. So our time is quickly passing us, but I want to ask you, what is the one country that you have not been to that is on your bucket list?
So the one country that I've been blessed in the sense that I've visited 6 out of 7 continents,
That's a
and
blessing. Absolutely.
that's yeah. And the country number is continually climbing rather, and so it was so funny because it also plays into Corona. So I had planned on my two bucket list places was India and Antarctica. And
Wow.
so I turned 39. I'm proud to say it. I turned 39 in October. And before COVID-19 hit, I planned on working on this whole kickoff to 40. Because I was just like, look, so judge me later. So I've always wanted to visit the Taj Mahal.
Hmm.
But I always said that I wanted to get engaged and proposed to in front of the Taj Mahal. If that did not happen, then I want to go before 40. Clearly, I'm trying to go before 40.
Right.
So what happened was, so I said 39, I wanted to be in front of the Taj Mahal. and then round up my 40th birthday in Antarctica and making that my seventh and final continent. And then COVID-19 hit,
I know.
and it was just like, yeah, you're going to stick to National Geographic and Indian food. And so even now, I'm still kind of looking like, well, when will they open up travel to Americans? And hopefully India will open up soon, and we get our numbers down, and then they get their numbers down, and the trip will be delayed, but it won't be denied, and all of that type of stuff. So those are my two bucket places. And right now they're on hold, they're on freeze, no pun intended. And I still have every intention to go. I just don't know when because of the current
Pandemic.
health, right, triple pandemic that we're experiencing.
Absolutely.
So,
You said right. Triple pandemic. We got
yeah,
COVID, racial unrest, and a whole lot of other stuff.
yeah, economic, just
Exactly. Exactly. Okay, so I'm curious. You said Antarctica. Is that a land trip or is that a cruise?
so it's both. So what I would have to do is fly to, so the closest commercial city, or I don't want to say commercial, but closest major city is Buenos Aires, Argentina.
Hmm.
Then from there you go to Ushuaia, which is like the southernmost point of Argentina. Then from there you take a cruise into Antarctica, and then you jump, and it's kind of costly, so that's another part of it too. I'm like, look, I want to spend this money, I want to go, but then you can hop into a smaller boat, and then you can be on the continent of Antarctica. And there's one spot that actually, because for the most part Antarctica is a research
Hmm.
um, station, and of course it doesn't belong to any one nation, but there's a spot there where I think is it Uruguay or Russia, but you can get a passport stamp saying you went to Antarctica. It's like a tourism thing. So I said I got to get this because my
Is
other cool stamp in my passport is from Gibraltar. And so I'm like, I gotta get this stamp. I gotta go. I gotta get this stamp. I gotta say that I did it. Of course, be the only person in my family that is gone. Like, I'm so excited about it. And so, with that being said, that's kind of how you would get there. Now, you can do a flyover, but you're literally just flying over. And I'm like, it ain't the same.
it's not. You gotta be on the
I need to,
ground, plant your feet, and be like, I'm here.
right, right. Right, with my Detroit hat on. Like,
Exactly. 313. I'm represent.
right.
So, it- that's why I'm so glad we brought you on the show today because you gave us so many great tips, so
Ah,
many great things. So now I want to circle back around to what we were talking about in the beginning about how people have apprehension. And you talked about being safe and understanding where you are. And if it doesn't feel right, getting out of there and knowing that some of the cultural norms that different places do and what the expectations are versus what we would expect, and making sure that we understand and know those differences. If someone is saying, you know what, girl, it's COVID. No, I'm not trying to go nowhere. Even when they get a vaccine, they got diseases around the world. Or people say, you want to go to where? Why? It's too cold. It's too far. What what advice would you give somebody that you think would spark an interest for them? Because I'm always talking to people and I'm like, traveling is the best thing. And I tell people, I said, Canada is right next door. Because I have people, they'll say, Kim, you always in Canada. I said, I love Canada. Why aren't you in Canada? I can't go right now because the border is closed.
Mm-hmm.
But when the border was open, we would just go for dinner, movies, whatever. And people would just be like, but it's Canada. I'm like, it's another country. There are Canadians. They're not Americans. We get to do all different types of things. And so you see it, like you said, it broadens your experience, it opens your mind. But for some people, I don't know if it's apprehension, if it's fear, they just, being stubborn, don't want to do it. And, they're locked up in an experience where they don't even know what's across their own river or across the state line, what would you tell someone?
So first, again, going back to my family sayings, you'll never fly with eagles if you hanging around turkeys and
All right.
chickens. And so one of the things that I've had to learn how to do is move silently and post after the fact,
Yeah.
because I'll never forget. I had a chance to visit Israel, and it was literally, I would say, out of every place that I've been, Israel was the only place where I was like, okay, let me make sure my affairs are in order, because, again, because you read the news. And I
Yeah.
was like, let me make sure my affairs are in order. Like, look, brother, you can have all my stuff. You split it with mama, like, remember me different. Y'all know what my wishes are. And the reason being was because I you again, reading what you read on in the newspaper, seeing what you see on TV, and so despite the fact that I knew people who went to Israel, and I talked to them, and I was like, oh no, let me figure this out. And so in talking to other people about my wish and my desire to go to Israel, first thing I said, oh no, 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 just all of this negativity. And then at that point, I was like, I got to silence it, because if it's God's will that I get there, it's going to be His will that either I stay there permanently or I get back home.
Amen.
And there is nothing that I can do, say, bargain, or anything to change that. And so, because of that, I silenced it. I went, I touched the Western Wall, and I had the time of my life. Now, if I sat down and or stayed and listened to folks, especially if you don't even travel, because you can't, that's almost like somebody telling me about money advice and you're broke. It is what it is. You can't advise me on that. You can only teach me how to not be, or to not be broke. And so, with that being said, sometimes you have to, it, whatever reason you travel. Some people travel for shopping. Some people travel for tourists. Some people travel for concerts. Whatever it is, do it because you're passionate about it, and understand that some people are not going to share that passion, and some people might try to dissuade you, and that's okay. That's their right to do so. But stay in your conviction and talk to people who have already gone places that you're interested in, because they might be able to give you some tips and tricks of the trade. That's number one. Number two, joining certain travel communities, especially those that have similar backgrounds as yourself, is super helpful, because then, one, you might even, in the case of a travel group, and they're like, oh, I'm going to, I don't know, Mexico, just hypothetically speaking. Somebody might say, well, I live in Mexico. They might meet up with you and show you around to different places that you didn't even know existed,
Yeah.
and then making sure that you're looked out for. And if somebody does offer that extent, or offer that to you, the very first thing you do is ask them, well, what do you need from the States? Because a lot of times people, especially if they're expats, and going back to the shea butter comment, certain places you can't find shea butter.
Yeah.
So it might be something simple as, hey, look, I need some clippers, some edge control, and some shea butter. Can you pack that and bring it with you? And it's like, oh, okay, this is a nice way to say thank you, or some hot sauce, in exchange for you, showing me around and making sure that I'm safe and all of that type of stuff for your hospitality.
Mm-hmm.
So again, finding out what your passion is and incorporating travel into it. Um, Also, looking at flight deals. Sometimes for a lot of people, they think travel is expensive, and in some cases it is. But now is like the best time to go somewhere if it's open, because flights are not full, and as long as you're wearing your PPE and practicing social distancing and all that type of stuff, um, you'll be okay. Now granted, if you're in a high risk category, stay home. But definitely taking that into consideration. Flying sometimes with friends. I love traveling with my friends. I've traveled with other people as well. But sometimes you also got to realize that, hey, what might start off as a group trip might turn into a solo or a duo trip because people's money fall off for whatever reason. Um, but definitely, if you have a niche or a passion for travel, again, just take that first step, book it, and then forget about it, and just go. If anything, this whole experience with COVID-19 and being grounded really, really makes you appreciate life and understand that, hey, here today and you could literally be gone tomorrow. And if that happens, have you lived? It's one thing to be alive, but have you lived? Have you done what you wanted to do? Have you followed your passion and your dreams? And if travel is one of those for you, have you had the opportunity to do so? And if so, do it again and continue to do it again. So,
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's a great way to end the show. Edwina, thank you so much for being on. Tell us how we can reach out to you if we have travel questions, want to get information and tips because you've been so many places like we talked about.
thank you, and thank you again so much, Kim, for having me. This was I was shocked when you initially reached out to me. I said, okay, sure, but this was really, really enjoyable, and I thank you so much for extending the invitation to speak to your audience. If folks want to get reach out to me, I can give you my Facebook information. I'm Edwina Simone on Facebook. That's spelled E as in Edward, D as in Delta, Win as in Nancy, A, Simone, Simon as in Nancy, E. You'll probably have to send me a message because some people say that they tried to add me, and I guess it's like Fort Knox on my page. I don't know what's going on. I'm just like, okay, some people can add me, some people can't. But if you try to send me a friend request and it doesn't work for whatever reason, just shoot me a message, put in the comments that you were watching the Kim B. Davis show, and I'll know, okay, that's where um, you found me from, or where you found me. And so definitely feel free to reach out. I love giving people advice on travel, and whether it's going to Toledo, Chicago, Istanbul, or Chennai. Although I've not been to Chennai, I know people who have. Definitely feel free to reach out, and I'd be more than happy to help you. I love seeing Black folk traveling. We all do the same thing, whether we're from Alaska to, Accra to Angola to Southeast Asia. We all do the nod. Like, it's just certain things we all do universally, and we all kind of look at each other like, hey, it's good to see somebody that look like me here, even if we don't speak the same language. So I love seeing Black folk traveling abroad, especially Black women. We've been getting our lives. If you just go on Instagram or Facebook, you just see just all type of fabulosity and stuff
Oh,
like
yes,
that.
you do.
And so definitely want to encourage more of us to be out in these global streets, and being good citizens.
Absolutely. Thank you, Edwina, so much for being on the
Thank you,
show.
Kim.
I knew you had stories and tips that you could tell us, so that's why I had to reach out to you. But again, thank you so much. Check out Edwina King on Facebook. Remember to mention that you saw her on the Kim B. Davis show or you heard her on the Kim B. Davis show, and she can give you some great tips on traveling. Thank you again for watching and listening to the Kim B. Davis show. I hope we'll see you on our next episode. And remember to always be magnificent.